Just to give you an example, when 18% came out, my phones lit up and people said, hey, we're back in business. We can source from India, we can buy from India, we can manufacture in India.
Who do you think has come out on top?
In my estimation, India has done a terrific job of moving forward in a very, very difficult environment. The tariffs never helped the Indian consumer, and they mostly punished the Indian consumer. Given the importance of agriculture as a sector in India, the government is rightly interested in protecting the interests of farmers, and I think they've done that.
Welcome to FO Talks. With me again is Russell Stamets, our in-house expert on trade deals. Russell is a lawyer by profession, and he is a partner in the FOI geopolitical risk consultancy firm. He works extensively with American and Indian businesses, and today we'll talk about the India-US trade deal. Russell, thank you for speaking to Fair Observer.
Thanks, Rohan. It's always exciting, and it's a great time to be talking about Indo-US trade.
Absolutely. But I want you to cut through the noise because there's so much media coverage about this. Yet nobody is getting into the basic question. Why is this trade deal so important?
Well, in the macro sense, bilateral trade agreements are what is replacing the otherwise larger World Trade Organization and all the multilateral trade agreements that we had previously. And so it's important to have it as part of the worldwide trend toward bilateral agreements. So in a larger sense, it was essential to get done. It's especially important for India and the US because the lack of it was getting to be a real problem. India had taken the initiative to be one of the first in the door to try to cut a deal with the Trump administration, and it didn't go well. Why it didn't go well has been a matter of recriminations, and it really doesn't matter to a great extent why it hasn't gone well, but it didn't go well, and people expected it to go well because both parties had invested so much in bringing the trade and geopolitical relationship together that this hiccup took on disproportionately great weight. And so it's as much a positive thing as it is, thank God we got something done, because it was starting to be an embarrassment for both parties.
Right, it was becoming the thorn was growing bigger and bigger because it got to a point where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who was one of the first few leaders to go and meet US President Donald Trump after the inauguration, has not been able to share the same stage after that, especially in the multilateral summits that have happened. So yes, this was indeed much needed, but who wanted it more? How badly did New Delhi want it compared to how badly Washington wanted it?
So one of the basic problems in getting this done is what you had an intensely mercantile approach on one side that was heavily invested in high-level commercial transaction, and the other side that treated it as a matter of national honor and life and death of the village. So you can see how that would be a big problem. So both sides completely mistook or almost deliberately mistook what the other was after. And when you make it a matter of pride, it reduces the capacity for rational thought, because it's all about emotion. And frankly, saying that one side wanted it more than the other wasn't really useful. It was one side was more interested or less interested. The Trump administration would have loved to have India as an early win, but these two parties were speaking absolutely the most divergent language you could have expected. And when India was not ready to do a deal on the basis on which the U.S. is operating with everyone worldwide now, they resorted to feeling hurt and that was there were genuine reasons for that, but it also was not helpful in trying to deal with the way that the reality of the Trump administration.
Right, but who do you think has come out on top? And I'm not. I don't want to put you. I don't want to put you in a tough spot. But how things are being played out now is that we still don't know what has been agreed upon in the deal. The details are still trickling in, but it's both sides are claiming victory. Who do you think is has come out on top?
Uh, in my estimation, India has done a terrific job of moving forward in a very, very difficult environment. I would I would hesitate to say that one side won or one side didn't win, but I can say that the uh, whether it was intentional or unintentional or fortuitous or improvisatory, that India has done a quality job, not simply of negotiating this, but negotiating on its own behalf. Now, they may not even feel like that, but I'm always of the opinion, and many others are, that the work of liberalization is certainly undone, or we can't even call it half done, but had certainly stalled. And it required some larger gesture. And the situation being such as it is in India, the domestic politics didn't allow for a more comprehensive or forward motion. And I think that India has done, and I think we have to give Prime Minister Modi a lot of credit of saying, "Hey, I think we can use this as a way to push other agendas to move things ahead." There are going to be some people who are unhappy, but just as there was at the beginning of liberalization, there were people who were protected under the old regime and didn't like the idea of openness. But I think, to be short about it, I think that India has done a terrific job, and that we will look back at this probably as liberalization, the point of liberalization 2.0. And I think that's a tremendous win for everybody, for those of us who believe in more liberalized trade and the capacity of the Indian economy to compete on an international basis. So I think there's a, if I had to choose a side, I'd say India did really well, and the U.S. is going to enjoy it as well.
Right, Russell, I agree with you. I'm a free markets guy myself. But I want to come to the liberalization 2.0 later. I think that's very fascinating how you framed it. I want to talk about, and I want to connect this conversation to our previous conversation where you extensively explained how American companies, especially tech, and not just big tech, but just large American companies are moving away from China. And you spoke about how American business leaders have made it a point that you have to get out of China. And one destination that has made an impact has been India. We know that Apple has shifted its manufacturing to India. In fact, India is making the largest number of iPhones. But I want to know if this deal is enough for US to completely decouple from China, or is that not possible anytime in the near future?
There will never be. It is unlikely that all of globalization will be undone. I don't view the uncoupling of China of the U.S. from China as deglobalization or anything, but basically the spreading of it. In fact, through establishing other beneficial relationships. I think that I know for a fact that both politically and business-wise, the U.S. desperately wants to have India as a confident, successful, vibrant, economically important partner in international global trade. And so I think that this is an essential first step. We may have been looking for it, waiting for it, and I think this really puts India back on the radar. Just to give you an example, when 18% came out, my phones lit up and people said, "Hey, we're back in business. We can source from India, we can buy from India, we can manufacture in India, we can send it." I don't think it was out 2 hours, and I had 30 phone calls from the U.S. I was asleep, and the phone was ringing off the hook. So there's a pent up energy and a desire to do that. I think this is an important nuance, or at least it is for me. Wouldn't it be nice if we had U.S. multinationals that were not headed by Indians who are interested in India? So far,
Like who? Like
Google,
who?
like anybody that's not Google, anybody that's not, Apple. Have we seen Tim Cook over here? We barely have seen him.
Hmm.
We need non-Indian origin executives who have sway in the economy to come over and take a look at India. And I think what this does is it makes that possible.
Hmm.
Uh, there's an over reliance and an unhealthy reliance on the many very distinguished business heads who are ethnically Indian in the U.S. But
Hmm.
that's a tiny, if the percentage of the population in the U.S. that's South Asian is less than the population that is Scandinavian Americans. So to give you some perspective, there are more Norwegians, Swedes, and Finns all put together than there are Indians. And if you listen to the Indian government, they would think that Indians were in charge of the entire place. They're not. And what this trade deal allows is people who don't love India will come and do business with India, and that's what's necessary.
Yeah. Absolutely, Russell. I totally agree with you on that. And I'm very optimistic about this trade deal because I feel like a lot of the Americans don't fully understand India, and that's where people like you come in because India still has a very socialist mindset. I think, and it's got to be because of our leaders. Because since independence in 1947, socialism was kind of force-fed to Indians, and only after 1991 did this idea of free markets, competition, really begin to take shape. It still hasn't seeped into Indian society fully, and I think that's where your expertise and your integration with the Indian community and the American community really helps in. And I think this trade deal is the first stepping stone to increasing that. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Not everybody on the planet loved China. Okay.
Hmm.
So loving China, understanding China, being sympathetic to Chinese culture, being respectful of Chinese culture was absolutely not essential to the rise of India, to China as an economic power. And there's always a sort of an undercurrent in India, like you have to understand us first, you have to value us first. And it, I think it's been the country's been suffering from gentle parenting
Hmm.
for way too long. Like, hey, Ethan, let's make better choices. Stuff like that. Whereas they thought that, and that's made it lacking in confidence when competing internationally. And so they mistake like Kohli shouting
Hmm.
at Australians. They mistake that for self confidence. They mistake that for passion. They mistake that for fierce determination. Whereas just being confident enough to open up your market, and if you have Hummel selling milk, producing milk in Michigan, you ought to be confident enough that Hummel can send milk from Michigan to India
Hmm.
without a 5,000-year-old culture folding in on itself. And I think this trade deal might be that uncomfortable moment when people say, "Hey, a lot of us we're ready." I think people that anyone who's unhappy with this trade deal from the Indian side should say, "Hey, we're ready. We're ready to play," and then just play.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think this was one of the red lines when it comes. I know you brought up milk, so I wanted to talk further about it. Agriculture, dairy, and poultry were the red lines for the Indian government. And I believe they still The details are still not yet, or maybe you don't know it, but maybe you can tell us more about what's happened on that front.
Well, uh, anyone who's followed like the blow by blow of these negotiations know that the public red lines are not necessarily what the private red lines are, and the election related red lines are not necessarily the ones that the government necessarily fought for in the room at the time. But I'll let that come out as it will. Um, Certainly, given the importance of agriculture as a sector in India, the government is rightly interested in protecting the interests of farmers, and I think they've done that. And I think that we'll see over time that this will work out well for groups in India once the change becomes clearer and more just, and the opportunities that this represent become more evident. And it'll also give an opportunity for the government to address places where change has to happen if India is going to have a role in the 21st century at all. And some things do have to change. I think everybody would agree.
Absolutely, and I think one major mistake that the Indian media has done has they've played a narrative, or maybe they just didn't get into the finer details. And and I want to bring up the example of walnuts and almonds here because India consumes a lot of dry fruit. As you know, you've been for a while now. Walnuts and almonds are consumed by the Indian household, the middle class, very regularly. And India only produces about 20% of its own consumption needs. So India was already importing almonds and walnuts, mostly from the US, of course, also from Australia. And that came with a 120% tariff. Now, that just made it more expensive for the Indian middle class. And one of the reasons for this tariff is nothing. India's been a colonial state. We are now run by the bureaucrats who also have a very colonial and extractive policy. And it reflected because eventually, when the middle class demanded walnuts and almonds, there were tariffs in place. And of course, the Indian middle class had to pay big money for it. But now with this trade deal, the tariffs are gone. So essentially, this is good for the Indian economy. This is good for the Indian middle class because we were already importing dry fruit, especially almonds and walnuts. So, and this is just one example I'm giving you. There are so many other such examples that have come out in this trade deal. And the Indian media has just not been able to explain it in a simpler way. I don't know how you've understood and analyzed these small caveats.
So the tariffs were always anti-consumer. The tariffs never helped the Indian consumer, and they mostly punished the Indian consumer. It was, to be generous, let's make the best argument for that. It was to protect jobs, to protect Indian industry, to give it a chance to compete globally. But what do you say about a 72-year-old child, that's ready to, at a certain stage, you're ready to compete. And given the actual rates of inflation, the disclosed inflation, 120% on our Badam Khatri. I mean, come on. How many ordinary, not even middle class, but I mean like gentle middle class homes touch sweets, and at 120%, were those really almonds? To a certain extent, was it like that? I mean, what was happening in there? So I think that there's going to be apples are another good example. I mean, 50.
Absolutely.
It's a little shocking to me that we have a major international bilateral trade deal where we fix the price of apples. But okay, fine. I think it's 50 rupees a kilo. But
yeah,
how many more people would eat apples if it was 50 rupees a kilo instead of 150 rupees? I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of that, and it's not as sexy and it's not as much of a polling issue. No one's going to say, "I want apples," or "I'll vote you out of business. But I think we're going to, as you suggest, we're going to see the benefits roll out very, very broadly in the coming months, whatever the details turn out to be.
Yeah. But so one thing that we still know is that the tariffs have not been completely removed. They've been lowered from 25% to 18%. But do you think that there's still some room for the tariffs to go down even lower?
Oh, yeah, I think for sure. I think if this works out, if everybody plays well together, I think that we can anticipate India getting a better and better deal. I think this gives an opportunity for Indian manufacturers to demonstrate their value to the American market, whereas 50% was a brick wall. So I think we're going to gradually see greater integration, and more importantly, we're going to see hopefully a reversal of the decline of foreign direct investment. I think this is really has the potential not simply to signal foreign direct investment increases, and which have been in a free fall basically the last several years.
Right, right. Russell, who do you think has had it tougher when it comes to selling this trade deal? Do you think, because I've been reading American media and there was seldom any mention of this trade deal, but when I looked at the Indian media, this is all that was being spoken about. So clearly there's one side that is obsessed about it, and then the other side, which is the US, doesn't really have too much to say, or maybe the media doesn't have too much to say. But how do you think it's being read beyond just the media?
Well, with the elections approaching sometime in April and consequential elections approaching in April, and given the nature of Indian media, it's not surprising at all that they're latching on to any issue at all. And I think it's very hard. I hope in 10 years I won't be able to say this, but frankly, it's very true that India doesn't really matter that much to the United States economically, and the importance of the relationship is in the reverse. The U.S. would love to change that. They would love to have India be more important to it economically, but they have their own needs to take care of. But right at the moment, whatever people have to say to console themselves for the lack of this agreement up till now. You can't put Russia plus Nigeria plus China plus this. You mix all of Africa together, it's still smaller than the state of California's trade with India. I mean, it's just not even close. So a lot of people in Delhi were talking about we'll replace the U.S. We don't need the U.S. But nobody in South India was talking like that. No one in South India was going to do that. And frankly, the great exhale of having Trump not attack the services industry is
and the IT.
The IT outsourcing, the GCCs and stuff like that. That is it's not a bullet dodge. That's an ICBM dodge. That's a huge issue. So it not only does what it does directly, but this deal takes and makes much safer India's greatest export right at the moment, which is basically IT services of different sorts. Right. That was the next. That was the next head on the chopping block.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but okay. So you say that India's coming. India's got elections in April, but the US also has the midterms coming. In fact, Donald Trump and his administration are facing a different kind of heat because of the Epstein files. But do you think they can somehow use this and get goodwill in the American public?
Well, certainly, I think the administration will fold this into the narrative portraying President Trump as a forceful deal maker and a remaker of the international economic and political order to the advantage of the United States. I think it fits into that narrative. Well, who is paying attention to that? To the India piece of that, it's a marginal increase to that, but I would say it's important. It's valuable, if not important.
Yeah. Russell, very quickly before we go, we all know that the United States under President Trump has become more mercantilist, and India under Prime Minister Modi over these years, over the last 10, 11 years, has become more protectionist. In fact, his government has had the highest number of tariffs on imports into India. And it's not just the US that has complained about it, the Australians have, the Japanese have, everybody has. So you've got the world's largest economy with mercantilists, and got the world's largest consumer base, which is protectionist. Do you think the two can get along going forward?
Uh, I certainly hope so. Let's take a generous view of what's been going on. Is a new approach to ruling India has been consolidating and establishing itself. And I think what I hope this signals is a self-confident India, an India that can say yes to international trade. Self-confidence, even a toddler can say no. In fact, that's a favorite thing for a toddler. Their first assertion of independence is to say no. So saying no is not a big deal. Your first stride toward being a self-confident adult is knowing when to say yes and when to say no. And I think that what this trade deal signals is, for however we got here, by whatever route, that India is self-confident enough to say yes to a deal, to say yes to a new future, and to say yes to its self-confidence that its people can compete on an international basis. And if we take it like that, I feel very, very positive about it. And I think that we have more shared here. The number one thing that the U.S. would like to have is a self-confident, self-sufficient India as a strong trading partner. And I think that India may over time start to believe that. And I hope that we can start with this. And this is an important and hugely valuable first step.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Russell, thank you very much for your time and for speaking to Fair Observer. And we still don't have all the details about this deal, but eventually I would like to bring you back again once we know everything, and we can do a deep dive with all the parameters and all the different industries that are going to benefit, not just in India but in the US as well.
I think everybody's looking forward to that, because I'm not sure anyone knows that list right at the moment. So it's exciting, and I think it shows people who are going to build a relationship together and working on issues and working on things to resolve. I think that's the best way to work on a positive relationship, and I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Russell.
Okay, thanks, Rohan.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.